The quiet force in the background. In the heart of New York City, beneath the shimmering chandeliers of the Sterling Ballroom, one of the most prestigious hotels in the world, billionaire Daniel Grant was hosting his annual business dinner. This event had become a high society staple, known for its opulence and the sheer clout of its guest list. The crowd of CEOs, investors, and dignitaries exchanged pleasantries over champagne flutes and gourmet appetizers, while waitstaff in crisp uniforms moved quietly among them, ensuring every detail was perfect. At 52 years old, Daniel was the epitome of success. Tall and fit, with graying temples and a gaze that commanded respect, he wore his wealth like a well-tailored suit, polished, refined, and without a single flaw. Daniel's reputation in the industry was legendary, as much for his business acumen as for his relentless ambition. He had built his empire from the ground up, acquiring assets across sectors and securing his place among the elite. Yet, amid all his triumphs, he often felt a void, a certain hollowness to the glitz and the gold. Tonight, something was weighing heavily on his mind. Standing discreetly near the edge of the room was Maria Ortiz, Daniel's longtime housekeeper. Maria was a woman in her mid-50s, with kind, gentle eyes that held decades of wisdom and resilience. Though she wore a modest black dress rather than the glamorous attire surrounding her, she exuded a quiet dignity that commanded its own respect. For over 15 years, Maria had been Daniel's steadfast support at home. She kept his household running, managed his affairs in his absence, and offered a comforting presence amid the storms of his high-stakes world. For years, Daniel had observed Maria's humility and dedication, and he'd come to realize that his life was as structured and orderly as it was because of her quiet strength. She had seen him through countless personal and professional trials, through mergers, breakups, and even the loss of his mother. Through it all, she'd never faltered in her role, never overstepped her boundaries, always understanding that her place was in the background. But as he looked around the room filled with power and prestige, Daniel had an epiphany. The people here were powerful, yet few understood the humility and quiet determination that defined Maria's life. Without second thoughts, Daniel walked over to Maria, startling her. She looked at him with surprise, used to watching from the sidelines at events like these. "Maria," he began, his tone soft yet earnest, "I'd like you to speak to my guests tonight." Her eyes widened, and she hesitated, glancing around at the crowd in disbelief. "Me, sir," she whispered, her voice laced with apprehension. "I don't belong up there. I'm just here to help." "Yes, you," Daniel replied gently, but firmly. "You have a perspective that no one else here does, something unique and valuable. I believe it would mean a lot to everyone here." Maria's hands trembled slightly, and she was about to protest, but she saw something genuine in his eyes, a quiet insistence, a desire for her to share the strength and wisdom that he had come to admire over the years. With a reluctant nod, Maria agreed. She felt a surge of nerves as she wondered what she could possibly say to a room full of titans. She was, after all, just a housekeeper. As the evening progressed, Daniel took to the stage to give his customary welcome speech. He thanked his guests for their presence, spoke about the year's accomplishments, and acknowledged the challenges and successes his company had faced. But then, he took a surprising turn. "Tonight," he announced, "I want to introduce you to someone very special. Someone who has taught me more about resilience, dignity, and true success than any business mentor ever could. She's not a CEO or an investor, but she's one of the wisest people I know. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my housekeeper, Maria Ortiz." The room fell into a stunned silence. All eyes turned to Maria as she slowly walked toward the stage, her heart pounding. Dressed in her simple black dress and low-heeled shoes, she stood in stark contrast to the glittering gowns and tuxedos around her. She felt out of place, vulnerable, yet there was a quiet strength in her that compelled her forward. When she reached the podium, Maria took a deep breath. Looking out at the sea of faces, she could feel the weight of their expectations, the incredulity in their eyes. But then she remembered Daniel's words, his faith in her, his belief that she had something important to share. She squared her shoulders, and in a soft but steady voice, she began. "Good evening," she started, her voice carrying a warmth that immediately softened the atmosphere. "I'm not a business person. I don't have a degree, and I don't make deals or sign contracts. But I have spent most of my life working for people who do. I've been a housekeeper, a cook, a caretaker. I've worked behind the scenes, and it's easy in my line of work to feel invisible." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the audience, noting how even the wealthiest among them seemed to listen with genuine curiosity. "Mr. Grant asked me to speak tonight, and while I don't have much experience with speeches, I'd like to share something I've learned. In my years working for Mr. Grant, I've come to understand that success is not just about money, or power, or influence. It's about kindness, respect, and the unseen hands that make everything possible." There was a shift in the room as Maria continued. The guests, who were accustomed to fast-paced deals and high-stakes negotiations, found themselves captivated by her simple, heartfelt words. She shared stories of her life, of waking up before dawn, of raising her children while juggling multiple jobs, of finding joy in the small, often unnoticed aspects of her work. She spoke of the pride she took in her work, of the dignity it brought her, even when others failed to see it. "In my line of work," Maria said, "I've met people who forget that success isn't just what you achieve for yourself, but what you inspire in others. I've worked for people who never learned my name, who didn't see me as anything more than someone who kept things clean and organized. But I've also worked for people like Mr. Grant, who understand that every person deserves respect, no matter their role." She looked over at Daniel, who gave her a small and encouraging nod, his eyes filled with admiration. "And I want to say this to all of you," Maria continued. "No matter how much money or power you have, remember the people who help you, who make your life easier, who work quietly so you can shine. True success, I believe, isn't measured by what you have, but by how you treat the people who serve you." The room was silent, but the silence was profound, a reverence that Maria could feel in her bones. She looked around, seeing expressions softened by her words, faces touched by a rare vulnerability. She had brought something into the room that was unexpected, a sense of humility, a reminder of the human element in a world driven by ambition. After a brief pause, Maria ended her speech with a gentle smile. "Thank you for listening to me, for allowing me to share a piece of my life with you. I hope that, in some way, my words remind you of the importance of kindness and respect. They are gifts you can give to anyone, no matter their station, and they are gifts that last longer than any success." She stepped back from the podium, and for a moment, the silence lingered. Then, slowly, one person stood and began clapping. Soon, the entire room rose to its feet, applauding her not as a housekeeper, but as someone who had reminded them of what truly mattered. Daniel watched her, his heart swelling with pride. He knew that Maria's words had left an indelible mark on the room, that her humble wisdom had touched even the hardest of hearts. She had shown them the strength in humility, the quiet power that came from a life lived with integrity. As the applause continued, Maria glanced back at Daniel, her face glowing with a mixture of relief and gratitude. She had stepped out of the shadows, if only for a moment, and her voice had reached where few others could. She had reminded everyone in that room, including Daniel, of the value of kindness, respect, and the people who often go unseen. The aftermath of truth. After Maria's powerful speech, the energy in the room shifted. The usual air of elitism and self-assuredness had softened, replaced by a quiet introspection. As the applause faded and guests returned to their seats, they couldn't help but feel a new kind of vulnerability. The powerful words of a humble housekeeper had reminded them of something many had long forgotten: the importance of humility, respect, and kindness. Daniel Grant, the host of the evening, looked around at the faces of his peers. Normally, they would be laughing, bragging, discussing new deals, or planning their next power moves. But tonight, they were subdued, as if Maria's words had stripped away the armor they wore in this cutthroat world of wealth and power. He saw colleagues staring into their glasses, lost in thought, and others speaking in hushed tones, visibly affected. As Maria stepped off the stage, a number of attendees approached her. They were men and women who commanded boardrooms and stock markets, yet now they stood before her, unsure, searching for words. "Maria," said John Whittaker, a high-profile real estate tycoon known for his aggressive acquisitions, I wanted to thank you. You reminded me of my mother. She used to work 2 jobs, doing laundry for wealthy families so I could go to school." He chuckled, though his voice was shaky. "I'd almost forgotten where I came from." Maria's eyes softened. She placed a hand gently on John's arm. "Never forget the people who helped you get here, Mr. Whittaker," she replied softly. "Success is never ours alone." Nearby, Ann Wallace, a formidable CEO in the tech industry, stood with misty eyes. She approached Maria with a heartfelt smile. "You're absolutely right, Maria," she admitted. "It's easy to lose sight of these things. I have dozens of people who work for me, but I can't say I know many of their names." She looked away, a bit embarrassed. "Your speech has made me want." Ripples of change. In the weeks that followed Maria's unforgettable speech, Daniel Grant noticed a subtle but undeniable change within his circle. The elite social world of billionaires and CEOs was notoriously resistant to any shift in attitude or perspective, but Maria's words had struck a deep chord, one that continued to resonate long after that evening. Daniel was one of the first to take Maria's words to heart. He had always considered himself a fair employer, believing that paying generous salaries and offering benefits was enough. But Maria had shown him that respect went beyond financial compensation. It required true human connection. Moved by her speech, Daniel made it a point to get to know each of his employees personally. No longer would they be merely names on a payroll or roles to fill. He wanted to understand the lives of the people who supported him, to see them for who they truly were. One morning, he surprised his household staff by calling for a casual breakfast meeting in his sunlit kitchen, a space they rarely saw him occupy. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted warmly, as his staff exchanged surprised glances. "I wanted to take a moment to thank each of you, not only for your hard work, but for being part of my life. You're not just employees. You're the reason my life runs smoothly, and I owe each of you more than I can say." The staff was caught off guard by his openness. Usually, their interactions with Daniel were limited to short directives and formalities. But today, they saw a side of him they hadn't before. Even Maria, who had come to know Daniel well over the years, was touched by his sincerity. As the weeks went by, Daniel didn't stop there. He began visiting his company's headquarters unannounced, walking the floors of his skyscraper's gleaming hallways, engaging with everyone from the custodial staff to the young interns who were just starting out. He made it a point to sit down with employees from different departments, asking about their families, their dreams, and their experiences. He wanted to know how he could make their work lives better. One day, during a company town hall meeting, he addressed his entire team. "I've spent much of my career focused on the bottom line, on profit margins and market shares. And while those things are important, I realize now that true success is also measured by the environment we create for one another. From now on, I want our company to be known not just for what we accomplish, but for how we treat each other. We're going to start prioritizing respect, empathy, and understanding. Let's build a legacy that goes beyond financial success." His words were met with applause, but more than that, they were met with renewed enthusiasm and a deeper sense of loyalty among his employees. Many had once viewed him as a distant figure, successful but inaccessible. Now they saw a man who was willing to change, who genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. Meanwhile, the other high-profile guests who had attended Daniel's dinner that night were also affected by Maria's words in ways they hadn't anticipated. Ann Wallace, the CEO who had admitted to Maria that she barely knew the names of her employees, began implementing changes within her own company. Inspired by Maria, Ann established a mentorship program for lower-level employees, offering them access to resources, training, and career development. She started making regular visits to various departments, sitting in on team meetings, and ensuring that everyone knew their voice mattered. John Whittaker, the real estate tycoon, went even further. He launched a foundation aimed at supporting underprivileged communities, focusing on job training and housing assistance for low-income workers. In every speech he gave about the foundation, he referenced the memory of his mother and Maria's speech, sharing how he had been reminded of his roots and inspired to make a difference. Maria, however, remained blissfully unaware of the impact her words had created. To her, that evening had been an out-of-body experience, one she still felt embarrassed thinking about. Though she had received numerous letters of thanks and appreciation from attendees, she believed she had only done what Daniel had asked of her. She returned to her work quietly, maintaining the same dedication she always had, finding comfort in the routines of her life. One rainy afternoon, as Maria was ironing Daniel's shirts in the laundry room, Daniel entered, smiling as he watched her for a moment before speaking. "Maria, do you have any idea how much you've changed things?" She looked up, surprised, pausing in her work. "I'm just doing what I always do, Mr. Grant," she replied, her tone humble as ever. "No, Maria," he said, shaking his head. "I mean what you said that night. It's had a profound effect, not just on me, but on so many others. I've received letters from people who were there, telling me how your words inspired them to change. You're more than just a housekeeper, Maria. You're a teacher, the leader." Maria blushed, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, I don't know about that, sir. I just told the truth, that's all." Daniel took a deep breath, determined to make her see the depth of her impact. "Maria, you have a gift, a rare ability to connect with people's hearts. You've reminded all of us that kindness and respect are as valuable as any business skill. You've given people a new way to look at success, and that's something very few can do." He paused, then continued, "I want to make sure that message reaches even more people. How would you feel about helping me with something new I've been planning?" Maria looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind?" "A foundation," Daniel explained, "focused on promoting dignity in the workplace and on supporting those who work in service roles. I want to provide scholarships, training programs, and resources for people who may not have had the same opportunities as others. And I want you to help me lead it." Maria was taken aback. The idea of being at the forefront of something so important, of having a platform to uplift people like herself, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had never seen herself as someone who could lead a foundation or speak in front of large crowds. Yet she felt a stirring in her heart, a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. "Me?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "You really think I could do that?" Daniel nodded with conviction. "More than anyone else, Maria. You've already proven that you have a voice worth listening to. I want you to be part of this, to guide it, to inspire others the way you've inspired me." Maria's heart pounded as she took in his words. The thought of stepping into such a public role was daunting, but she realized that this was her chance to give back to the community that she had come from, to honor the struggles of people like her mother, her friends, and all the service workers who often went unseen. Finally, she nodded, a quiet resolve settling within her. "If you really think I can do it, Mr. Grant, then I'll try. For all the people who work hard and dream of something more." Daniel's face broke into a wide smile. "You're going to do more than try, Maria. You're going to change lives." Over the following months, Maria worked closely with Daniel and a team of advisors to establish the Dignity Foundation. Their mission was simple but powerful: to elevate the lives of those in service industries by providing education, advocacy, and resources that would help them thrive. They launched programs that offered scholarships for the children of service workers, vocational training, and workshops on workers' rights and financial literacy. They even created a mentorship initiative where executives and CEOs would volunteer to mentor service workers, helping to break down social and economic barriers. Maria found herself more involved than she had ever been in her life. She was no longer just the quiet woman in the background. She was at the forefront, meeting with donors, giving talks at events, and sharing her story to inspire others. She traveled to schools, community centers, and corporate events, her voice carrying a message of hope and respect. At each event, she spoke of her experiences, her pride in her work, and the value of humility and kindness. Her words resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, and she became a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. She found herself speaking alongside leaders and celebrities, people she had once only seen on television, but she never lost sight of her roots. She continued to live simply, maintaining her humility, her faith, and her sense of purpose. The foundation's impact grew beyond what Daniel and Maria could have imagined. It began to attract national attention, and soon, companies across the country were implementing similar programs to support their service staff. Policies were enacted, wages were raised, and workplaces transformed as more people recognized the value of treating every worker with dignity. Maria's story had become a catalyst for change, inspiring others to see that true success was about lifting others as you rise. She had opened the eyes of those who once looked down on service work, showing them that strength, integrity, and success could be found in the humblest of roles. Yet, through it all, Maria remained the same, quiet, compassionate, and driven by a simple desire to make the world a better place. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she had given voice to countless others, from humble beginnings to a national movement. As the Dignity Foundation continued to gain momentum, Maria Ortiz found herself standing at the helm of a movement that was growing beyond her wildest dreams. What had started as a simple speech, inspired by her years of humble service and quiet wisdom, had blossomed into a national force for change. People from across the country were talking about her story, her words echoing in boardrooms, classrooms, and community centers. She had become a symbol of resilience, humility, and the power of quiet dignity, and her foundation was challenging society's very perception of service work. For Maria, however, this new role came with challenges she had never anticipated. She was now navigating a world of public speaking engagements, media interviews, and large-scale events. As someone who had always preferred to work quietly in the background, she found the constant attention overwhelming. But she reminded herself of the mission, of the people who had inspired her own journey. Her mother, her colleagues in the service industry, and the countless individuals who worked tirelessly every day without acknowledgement. This wasn't about her, it was about them. Daniel Grant, her friend and partner in the foundation, continued to support her every step of the way. He understood that Maria was stepping far outside her comfort zone, and he did his best to ease her transition into this new world. Together, they traveled the country, meeting with community leaders, workers, and activists, each with their own story of struggle and resilience. Daniel's presence was reassuring, a steady reminder that she wasn't alone in this journey. One of their first major initiatives was a nationwide listening tour. Maria insisted on visiting small towns, urban neighborhoods, and rural communities, places that were often overlooked by policymakers and corporate executives. She wanted to meet the people who formed the backbone of society, the ones whose voices were rarely heard. She listened to janitors, cooks, nannies, gardeners, factory workers, and maintenance staff, each with a unique story, but all bound by a shared experience of hard work and sacrifice. At every stop, Maria sat down with people over simple meals or cups of coffee, listening intently to their stories. She heard tales of triumph and heartbreak, stories of raising families on minimum wage, of dreams deferred, and of the quiet pride that came from doing honest work. She found herself moved by their resilience, inspired by their courage, and heartbroken by the injustices they faced. These were the voices that had been silenced for too long, and she was determined to bring them to the forefront. One of the most memorable stops was in a small town in West Virginia. There, Maria met an elderly couple, Jim and Edna, who had spent their entire lives working in a coal mine and as a school custodian, respectively. Jim had retired with little to show for his decades of hard labor, his body worn down by years of grueling work. Edna, despite her age, still worked part-time at the school to help make ends meet. As Maria sat with them in their modest home, Edna spoke of the pride she took in her work, in keeping the school clean for the children. But she also spoke of the indignities she had endured, the dismissive attitudes of the school administration, the lack of benefits, the struggle to afford medical care. Tears filled Edna's eyes as she confessed, "Sometimes I feel like we're invisible, like no one cares about people like us." Maria took Edna's hands in hers, her heart aching at the weight of those words. "You're not invisible, Edna," she said gently. "Your work matters. You matter. And I promise you, we're going to make sure that the world sees and values people like you." Jim and Edna's story, along with countless others, fueled Maria's determination. When she returned from the tour, she and Daniel worked tirelessly to compile a report, documenting the stories they had heard and the systemic issues that had come to light. They used these stories to advocate for change, meeting with government officials, business leaders, and activists, urging them to take action to support service workers. They called for better wages, healthcare benefits, and job protections, arguing that these were not luxuries but basic rights. The foundation's work caught the attention of national media, and soon Maria found herself in the spotlight again. She was invited to speak on television shows, at university panels, and even in front of Congress. Her humility and sincerity captivated audiences, and people were moved by her simple yet profound message that every person, regardless of their job title, deserved dignity and respect. As Maria's influence grew, so did the scope of the foundation's work. They launched scholarship programs for the children of service workers, providing them with opportunities that their parents had never had. They established emergency funds for workers facing financial hardship, and they partnered with local organizations to provide legal assistance to those who were being mistreated or exploited in their workplaces. But with every success, Maria found herself facing new obstacles. There were those who resisted the foundation's message, who viewed it as a threat to the established order. Some business leaders criticized her for meddling in corporate affairs, arguing that service work was low-skilled and did not deserve higher pay or additional benefits. They dismissed her movement as idealistic and unrealistic. One particularly vocal critic was Victor Blackwell, the CEO of a major hotel chain, who publicly accused Maria of creating unnecessary drama in the industry. He argued that service workers were replaceable and that raising wages would hurt the economy. His words stung, but Maria refused to be discouraged. She knew that change was never easy, and she was prepared to face opposition head-on. One evening, after a particularly grueling day filled with meetings and media appearances, Maria sat alone in her small apartment, feeling the weight of the journey she had undertaken. The criticism, the long hours, the constant scrutiny, it was all beginning to take its toll. She wondered if she was truly making a difference, if her words and efforts were enough to overcome the deeply ingrained attitudes and systems that marginalized people like herself. As she sat in quiet contemplation, she received a message from Ann Wallace, the CEO who had attended Daniel's dinner that fateful night. Ann had become one of the foundation's strongest allies, and her support had been invaluable. The message read, "Maria, I just wanted to thank you. I know the path you're on isn't easy, but your courage has changed the lives of so many, including mine. I want you to know that I'm standing with you, and so are countless others who believe in what you're doing. Don't lose heart. You're changing the world, one story at a time." Maria felt tears prick her eyes as she read Anne's words. She was reminded that she was not alone in this fight, that there were people who believed in her vision and were willing to stand beside her. The words of gratitude and encouragement rekindled her spirit, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. The next day, Maria returned to the foundation with a reinvigorated determination. She and Daniel continued to push forward, expanding their reach, building partnerships with organizations across the country, and working tirelessly to uplift the lives of those they served. They held workshops for service workers, teaching them about their rights, financial literacy, and professional development. They organized events to celebrate the contributions of service workers, honoring them as the unsung heroes of society. The foundation's impact became so significant that it caught the attention of policymakers. A bill was proposed in Congress to create federal protections for service workers, inspired by the work of the Dignity Foundation. The bill aimed to establish minimum wage standards, require benefits for full-time service workers, and protect them from exploitation and abuse. On the day of the congressional hearing, Maria was invited to testify before the committee. Standing before a room filled with senators, journalists, and advocates, she took a deep breath, steadying herself as she prepared to speak. "Thank you, senators, for allowing me to be here today," she began, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "I am here not just as a representative of the Dignity Foundation, but as a voice for millions of workers across this country who go unseen and unheard. These are the people who clean our buildings, prepare our food, care for our children, and keep our communities running. They may not have titles or degrees, but they are the backbone of our society, and they deserve to be treated with respect." Maria spoke of the people she had met during her travels, sharing stories of hardship and resilience, painting a picture of the challenges service workers faced daily. Her words were powerful, stirring the emotions of everyone in the room. Even the most hardened politicians couldn't help but be moved by her sincerity. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Her testimony became a turning point, galvanizing support for the bill, which was eventually passed into law. The Service Workers Protection Act became a landmark piece of legislation, providing long overdue rights and protections for millions of people across the nation. For Maria, the passing of the bill was a monumental victory, but she knew the work was far from over. The foundation continued to grow, reaching new communities, touching more lives, and inspiring others to join the movement. Maria had become a national figure, but she never allowed the fame or accolades to change her. She remained rooted in her values, driven by a simple desire to make the world a better place. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of the foundation's headquarters, overlooking the city that had once seemed so overwhelming, she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she was no longer the quiet housekeeper in the shadows. She was a leader, a change-maker, and a voice for those. The unbreakable spirit. The passage of the Service Workers Protection Act marked a watershed moment in Maria's journey. The Dignity Foundation had not only brought about legal changes, but had also sparked a shift in the national consciousness. People across the country began to recognize the value and humanity of service workers, acknowledging that these roles were far more than just jobs. They were lifelines, supporting the fabric of daily life in society. But while Maria felt a deep sense of fulfillment from these accomplishments, she knew that legislation was only part of the answer. Cultural change would take time, and she was prepared for the long, grueling road ahead. Although she had become a national figure, Maria remained deeply humble and dedicated to the people she represented. She continued to travel, meeting with service workers, employers, and community leaders to discuss ways to build a more inclusive and compassionate society. However, as the foundation's profile grew, so did the resistance. The act had stirred controversy among certain powerful business groups, who saw it as an intrusion into their autonomy. Some employers resented the new mandates for fair wages and benefits, viewing them as an unnecessary financial burden. Several prominent business owners started a media campaign against the foundation, painting Maria as an idealistic disruptor who didn't understand the realities of running a business. One of her most vocal opponents was Victor Blackwell, the CEO of a prominent hospitality conglomerate. In public interviews, he dismissed her efforts as misguided, accusing her of romanticizing service work and harming the economy with unsustainable policies. "Maria Ortiz has good intentions," he said in one interview, "but good intentions don't pay the bills. Businesses like mine are the backbone of the economy, and we can't survive if we're forced to pay unreasonably high wages and benefits for low-skilled work." The harsh words stung, and Maria felt the weight of the backlash. There were days when the criticism and negativity seemed overwhelming, making her question her own resolve. Could one woman truly make a difference against an entire system that had operated this way for decades? She worried that the foundation's progress might be undermined by the resistance of these powerful figures. Daniel, ever her steadfast ally, encouraged her to stay the course. "Maria, every great movement faces resistance. Change is frightening for people who've become comfortable with the status quo. But you are not alone. You have allies, strong ones, and more importantly, you have the truth on your side. Don't let them deter you." Emboldened by Daniel's support, Maria decided to confront the criticism head-on. She agreed to appear on a popular national talk show alongside Victor Blackwell, turning what could have been a divisive media spectacle into a chance to explain her mission in front of millions. The talk show set was bustling with activity as Maria took her seat on the stage, facing the bright lights and the expectant crowd. Victor Blackwell sat across from her, exuding the confidence of a man who was used to getting his way. The host, a respected journalist, began with an overview of the Service Workers Protection Act, then turned to Maria with the first question. "Maria, you've been hailed as a hero by many, but there are those who say your foundation's work is idealistic and could have unintended consequences for the economy. How do you respond to critics who claim that your advocacy for service workers is unrealistic?" Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that millions were watching, and she wanted to make sure her message came across clearly. "Thank you for the question," she began, her voice calm and measured. "I understand that change can be unsettling, and I respect the concerns of those who worry about the impact on businesses. But I want to emphasize that service workers are not asking for luxury. They're asking for basic dignity and fairness. No one should have to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table, especially when they work full-time hours. I believe a strong economy is one that supports all its people, not just those at the top." Victor shifted in his seat, and when the host turned to him, he launched into a rebuttal. "Maria, I respect your passion, but you're simplifying a very complex issue. Service work is important, sure, but it doesn't require the same skills or education as other professions. We can't just arbitrarily raise wages and add benefits without considering the ripple effects on businesses. If we can't make a profit, then there are no jobs at all." Maria listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. When he finished, she spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand your perspective, but let me ask you this. Can we really put a price on human dignity? Every person who works hard deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of the role they play. This isn't about punishing businesses. It's about creating a system where everyone can thrive, where success doesn't come at the expense of those who keep our world running." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. Maria's authenticity, her humility, and her quiet determination resonated in a way that was impossible to ignore. Victor, despite his polished arguments, found himself struggling to respond. He hadn't anticipated the depth of her conviction or the impact of her words. After the show aired, Maria received an outpouring of support from people across the country. Her phone rang nonstop with messages of encouragement from service workers, community leaders, and even a few business owners who admitted they had been inspired by her message. The foundation's website was flooded with donations, and volunteers from all walks of life signed up to join the movement. But one letter, in particular, stood out to her. It was from an anonymous source, written in a careful, almost shaky script. The letter read, "Dear Maria, I watched your interview and wanted to reach out. I am a business owner who has been guilty of looking down on the workers who keep my business running. Your words reminded me of my mother, who raised me alone while working as a housekeeper. I had forgotten what it feels like to struggle, to fight for every dollar. Thank you for reminding me of my roots. I will do better." Maria read the letter twice, feeling a swell of emotion. She had no way of knowing who had sent it, but the words gave her strength. This was what she was fighting for. A world where people saw each other's humanity, where no one was invisible. The Dignity Foundation continued to grow, now with a new mission, Project Voices, an initiative focused on educating young people about the value of all work and fostering empathy and respect across socioeconomic lines. Project Voices partnered with schools and colleges, holding workshops, career days, and lectures aimed at changing perceptions from an early age. They shared stories of service workers, emphasizing the vital role they played in society and the challenges they faced. Maria herself would often visit schools, speaking to students with the same humility and warmth that had defined her journey. One day, while visiting a high school in Chicago, Maria met a young girl named Alicia. After Maria's talk, Alicia approached her, her eyes bright with determination. "Ms. Ortiz, my mom works as a janitor. I've always been proud of her, but sometimes other kids make fun of me because she doesn't have a fancy job. Listening to you today, it reminded me that my mom's work matters. She's a hero, just like you." Maria knelt down, taking Alicia's hand. "Your mother is indeed a hero, Alicia. She works hard to provide for you, and there's nothing more honorable than that. Never let anyone make you feel ashamed of her work. People like her, like you, are what make this world better." The impact of Project Voices grew rapidly. Students who attended the workshops carried Maria's message home, sharing it with their families, friends, and communities. The foundation received letters from parents, teachers, and even school principals, all thanking Maria for planting seeds of empathy and respect in young minds. Slowly but surely, the cultural change Maria had dreamed of began to take root. As the foundation's work expanded, Maria and Daniel hosted an annual event honoring service workers from across the country. The event became a celebration of resilience, with workers sharing their stories and awards presented to those who had made significant contributions to their communities. This gathering of individuals from all walks of life, housekeepers, janitors, waitstaff, maintenance workers, and more, became a testament to the dignity of service and the strength of the human spirit. At the event's climax, Maria stood before the crowd, looking out at the faces that had inspired her journey. With tears in her eyes, she spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Tonight, we celebrate each and every one of you. You are the heartbeat of this nation, the strength that holds us together. I want you all to know that you are seen, you are valued, and you are loved. You are the reason we keep going, the reason we fight for change. This is your night, and I am honored to stand beside you." The audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that echoed throughout the hall. Maria looked over at Daniel, who nodded at her with a proud smile. This was what they had worked for, a movement that had grown beyond anything they could have imagined, a community united in dignity and respect. As Maria stood on that stage, surrounded by people who had once felt invisible, she knew that the foundation's work would continue long after she was gone. She had helped plant the seeds of change, and she could already see the first blooms of a future where every person, regardless of their job title, would be treated with the respect and kindness they deserved. The legacy of compassion. As the Dignity Foundation continued its mission, Maria Ortiz's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Her journey had taken her from a humble housekeeper in the shadows to the face of a national movement for dignity, respect, and equity for all workers. Now, as she entered the twilight years of her life, Maria began to reflect on her journey and the legacy she would leave behind. The foundation had grown into a powerful force, with offices across the country and partnerships with major organizations. Project Voices was now a staple in school curriculums in numerous states, teaching young people to value all professions and to treat every individual with respect. Maria's dream of a cultural shift was well underway, and she could see its effects rippling across generations. However, Maria understood that her role as the face of the foundation would eventually need to be passed on. She had become a beloved figure, a symbol of resilience and compassion, but she wanted the movement to be bigger than herself. She wanted it to endure, to inspire change long after she was gone. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maria sat in her small, cozy office, sipping a cup of tea as she looked over reports from the Foundation's various initiatives. Daniel Grant entered, his face alight with his usual energy, yet there was a quiet respect in his gaze. Over the years, he had watched Maria's journey with awe, grateful that she had shared her vision with him and allowed him to be a part of something so transformative. "Maria," he began, taking the seat across from her, "we've been discussing the future of the Foundation. The board believes we need a new generation of leaders to carry on your work." Maria nodded. She had anticipated this moment. Though her heart ached at the thought of stepping back, she knew it was necessary for the Foundation to continue thriving. "I agree," she said, her voice calm and resolute. "The Dignity Foundation was never about me. It's about the people we serve. It's time for new voices to lead." Over the next few months, Maria and Daniel worked tirelessly to prepare the transition. They identified passionate, dedicated individuals who had been involved in the Foundation's work for years, those who shared Maria's vision and values. Together, they selected a diverse team of leaders, teachers, former service workers, young activists, and experienced nonprofit executives, each bringing a unique perspective to the mission. One of those leaders was Alicia Martinez, the young girl Maria had met in Chicago years ago, whose mother worked as a janitor. Now a college graduate with a degree in social work, Alicia was filled with the same passion and drive that had inspired Maria throughout her journey. Maria saw in Alicia a reflection of her own humble beginnings, a young woman committed to honoring her roots and making the world a better place. At a ceremony announcing the new leadership, Maria addressed the Foundation's staff, supporters, and the public with her final official speech as the head of the Dignity Foundation. The event was held in a large auditorium, filled with familiar faces, service workers, corporate allies, community leaders, and people from all walks of life who had been touched by her message. She stepped up to the podium, her presence still commanding despite her age. She was greeted by a standing ovation, the audience acknowledging the legacy she had built. Maria smiled, taking a moment to let the emotions settle, then began to speak. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm and steady. "Thank you for believing in this vision, for standing beside me, and for helping to build a world where everyone is treated with dignity. When I first started this journey, I never imagined it would grow into something this powerful. I was just a housekeeper, a woman who knew what it felt like to work hard and go unseen. I never set out to be a leader. I simply wanted to make life a little better for people like me." She looked out at the crowd, meeting the eyes of people who had become like family to her. "But together, we have done so much more. We have created a movement that will outlast all of us, that will carry forward the values of respect, kindness, and fairness. Today, I am passing the torch to a new generation of leaders. I know they will continue this work with the same love and dedication that brought us here. And I hope each of you will support them as you have supported me." Maria paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Remember, every person has worth. Every job has value. And true success is measured not by how much we have, but by how we treat those around us. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for walking this path with me." As Maria stepped back from the podium, the audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Alicia, Daniel, and the other new leaders joined her on stage, embracing her one by one. There were tears, laughter, and heartfelt words shared as Maria symbolically passed the torch to the next generation. In the weeks that followed, Maria adjusted to her new role as an advisor, allowing herself to step back and trust that her vision was in capable hands. She spent more time with her family, reconnecting with old friends, and even started a small community garden in her neighborhood. Yet, her heart was never far from the foundation. She continued to attend events, mentor young leaders, and quietly support the work she had started. As time went on, the Dignity Foundation continued to thrive, expanding its reach to new communities and countries. Alicia and the team introduced new initiatives that addressed emerging issues, adapting the foundation's mission to meet the changing needs of the workforce. They launched a digital platform that connected workers with resources, legal support, and training programs, ensuring that the foundation's impact could reach anyone, anywhere. Maria watched with pride as the foundation evolved, knowing that its mission was in good hands. She had built something that would endure, something that would continue to honor the dignity of workers long after she was gone. One day, several years later, Maria attended an event celebrating the foundation's 20th anniversary. She was greeted by familiar faces and new ones, young people who had joined the movement after hearing her story. Many approached her with gratitude, telling her how the foundation had changed their lives, how her message had inspired them to pursue their dreams with pride. As she looked around, Maria felt a profound sense of peace. She had lived a life of service, humility, and purpose, and she knew she had left the world a better place. Standing beside Alicia, Daniel, and the other leaders, she felt surrounded by the love and gratitude of a community she had helped build from the ground up. In her heart, Maria knew that this was her true legacy, not just the foundation or the policies it had changed, but the lives it had touched and the dignity it had restored to so many. She had given voice to the invisible, and in doing so, she had shown the world that every person mattered, that every life held value. The Dignity Foundation continued to flourish, and Maria's story became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the quietest among us could make a difference. Her name became synonymous with kindness, respect, and the unbreakable spirit of those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. As the years passed, Maria's health began to decline, but her spirit remained strong. She continued to offer her guidance and wisdom until her final days, never losing the humility and grace that had defined her journey. When she eventually passed away, the world mourned the loss of a remarkable woman, but her legacy lived on in the hearts of those she had inspired. Her funeral was attended by thousands, from prominent figures to service workers, each person whose life she had touched in some way. At the service, Alicia delivered a eulogy that captured the essence of Maria's life. Maria taught us that true greatness is found in humility, that true strength lies in compassion, and that true success is measured by the impact we have on others. She showed us that every life, every job, every person deserves respect and dignity. Her spirit lives on in each of us, and in the Dignity Foundation, which she built with love and dedication. Maria may be gone, but her light will continue to guide us, to inspire us, and to remind us of what it means to be truly human. As Alicia finished speaking, there was a moment of silence, followed by a heartfelt applause that echoed through the chapel. Maria had left the world, but her story, her mission, and her message remained as powerful as ever. The Dignity Foundation continued to grow, adapting to new challenges and expanding its mission across borders. Maria's portrait hung in the entrance of every foundation office, a reminder of the woman who had started it all. A woman who had taught the world to see the invisible, to value the overlooked, and to honor the dignity in every human being. And thus, Maria Ortiz's legacy endured, a beacon of hope and compassion that would guide future generations, reminding them that every person, no matter their role, held immeasurable worth.